everybody. My name is Meagan Keane, and I am part of the Pro Video team at Adobe. But I actually started my career as a filmmaker. I spent a decade as an editor, producer, and really what's kept me so interested in the video industry over all these years is that it's constantly evolving. There's always new innovation that's affecting how we all tell stories. Most recently, the topic is AI. But there's a lot of considerations that we really need to be considering as we think about AI and how it's going to shape the future of the video industry. And that's why we're here today. I'm really excited to be joined by Aaron Butler. Thank you so much for being here, Aaron.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Why don't we start out giving the audience a little bit of an understanding of where you're coming from? What are some of your projects that they may recognize, and how did you get your start?
I got my start way back when I thought I was going to be a lawyer, and I was going to UC Berkeley, but I was making short films in all my spare time. I really fell in love with that medium. And I met this director, his name Bill Jersey, and he'd been nominated for 2 Academy Awards and was this incredible kind of titan in the documentary industry. And I showed him one of my short films, and he was like, "You're an artist." And no one had ever called me that before. And so law school went away and never actually ended up in film school. He kind of took me on, became this incredible mentor, and that sort of launched my career. And so I started in documentaries and then eventually moved into indie scripted features, and then eventually got my first scripted TV show, which was Euphoria.
Oh, a little title that I think people might be familiar
tiny
with.
little show called Euphoria, HBO.
Yeah, I mean, you and I met, like 14 years ago?
Yes.
And you were a documentary filmmaker
Correct.
at the time. How has the shift been from really true documentary work into more indie, into this really like a zeitgeist to societal conversation right now? Like Euphoria is such a major title. Like, how has that progression of your career been?
So it's interesting because for me, it's all story. And I've done a lot of different aspects of story. I've worked as a cameraman and a sound person, and I've produced things, and I've done fiction and nonfiction. And so for me, it's always about the story, and it's always about the emotion. And so, yes, there are differences in terms of like documentary. A lot of times it's my writer side, because you're really building structure, you're building character, you're creating these arcs from hundreds of hours of footage. And then it's a little bit different, with a scripted piece. That's more my actor side. And I came from an actor background, a theater actor and also theater director. And working with actors I love too, because that's a completely different experience. But again, at the heart of acting is emotion. And it's like an understanding the human experience. And so they're more similar than they are different, at least to me.
It's interesting because as I've gone through my career, and I know you'll be able to relate to this, it's interesting that where I first started documentary, like you could really only see a documentary if you went to a film festival.
Right.
You could only, like maybe people were familiar with like
PBS.
National Geographic, PBS.
Right.
But now like we have evolved to this place where you can find audiences across so many different platforms, across, social platforms, streaming networks. And really like it all does come down to story, whether it's a 30-second story or, a 90-minute story,
Right.
that the heart of it is this sort of narrative through line, nonfiction or fiction. So how have you grown your storytelling muscles over the years working as a filmmaker?
There's kind of 2 different parts. One part is learning the craft, and a lot of that is technical, but a lot of storytelling can be kind of technical too. Like my first mentor that I was talking about, Bill Jersey, he had all these little principles like emotion before information, and things like that, little shorthands for learning. This is how emotion works. This is how you grab an audience. This is how you hold it. This is how you make them feel. This is how you make them laugh, how you make them cry. That mentorship process has been big for me, where I think you learn from every single person you work with. And not just directors and producers, but I learn from my assistant editors. I learn from all the people. Sometimes a post PA will come in and watch something and give an incredible, like, what about that? Oh, that's a great idea. I love the collaboration. And I think I've learned so much from every single person I've worked with. And I think being open to that process and this sort of diversity of projects, from from commercials to, to reality, to documentary, to indie feature, to TV. There's something to learn about each of those mediums. And I think they feed into each other. So I think I approach my scripted work maybe more from a documentary perspective, where in my mind, I have creative freedom to push and pull and take this line and re-edit and remove. And, I'm used to in documentary to being really flexible and, again, looking at the story, what does the story need? What do we need emotionally? And can I create that, given the pieces that I have, given the scripted pieces that I have? And it goes the reverse way. I think my scripted work has made my documentary work more dramatic, more cinematic. Can I make this more of a visual experience? Can I make it more emotional and like it would if it was scripted? And so I think these things can kind of feed into each other. So these are, I think the collaboration and learning and the diversity of mediums, I think, has helped me become a better storyteller. Absolutely.
The analogy that I love of documentary filmmaking is it's like having a puzzle, but you don't have the reference picture. Right. So you have all the pieces that it's going to turn into, but you don't have the reference picture. And I can totally see that analogy in your work on Euphoria. That like there are scenes where I'm like, oh, this is like a verite documentary cut scene, even though it was scripted and there are actors playing parts that.
Absolutely. And that's, part of that comes, from the writer-director, Sam Levinson. He is so creative on set, and his scripts are brilliant and incredible starting point. And then he just goes beyond, he loves to experiment and play, and especially with his DP, Marcel, too. They love to play and experiment. And so when a scene comes to us, we have so much to work with. And Sam expects us to play, and that's the kind of vibe that we have on Euphoria is let's play, let's create, let's experiment. And we have what we call alts. We do tons of alts. This is the play in action. So it's like, well, what if we did the beginning like this? Oh, what if we just lopped the ending off? Well, what if we use this different song? What if we use two songs? What if we did this? And we just try and we play and experiment. And then through these experiments, we take all the different pieces and they put them together to try to find what is the most unexpected, the most emotional, the most surprising, the most engaging thing we can do.
And you've just recently also gotten into commercial editing. Yeah. How is that in more of a consolidated format where you're having to take that storytelling but do it in a really short form? How has that been for you?
It's been interesting. Because it's this concentrated storytelling where in a lot of ways, it's literally every frame makes a difference. And the tiniest little switch changes the rhythm, changes the motion. And it's fun because it's, and on some of these things I've done where it's like a 1-minute teaser commercial, but it's a little story. It's a little short film. And the order, a lot of times we have, well, what if we switch the order of this? And, oh, what if we put these two shots together? This creates a new layer of story or a new layer of meaning. And a lot of times there are these little journeys that you're taking the audience on. And so it's like all the storytelling and emotion applies in the same way, but it's just a different feel because it's so rhythmic and cinematic a lot of times and very contained. But that's what's fun and challenging about it.
So give us a sense of sort of what your general familiarity is with AI. Is AI coming into your workflows yet? And if so, how? So
AI hasn't come into my editing workflows yet, but I have played with ChatGPT a lot. And I find it's it's really interesting to play with, to both see its strengths and weaknesses. In a lot of ways, it's really powerful at pattern recognition and that kind of thinking. So as a research partner, hey, I read this one thing about storytelling in this one book. And it'll be like, it's in this analogy about this. Can you find it? Boom, finds exactly, oh, it's this author did this. There's this other storybook that has this analogy. Is this the same analogy? Yes, this is the same analogy. Well, what about, Joseph Campbell's, hero's journey? Does this line up? No, these are different things. It's like, oh, so it's really good at kind of retrieval and pattern recognition. But I also think that's its weakness because in a way, it's a parrot. And the artificial intelligence, I feel like all the intelligence comes from the user. It's you that are asking the right questions. It's you that are putting the pieces together. It's you that are doing all of the intelligent activities. And so whether or not it's giving you an intelligent response depends a lot on the intelligence that you're giving it. And so I do think it's very limited in that way, but really can be really powerful and really useful for certain things. Yeah.
You've already mentioned, but emotion is such a huge motivator in terms of how you edit, how you tell stories. When you think about these concerns that people have around, AI replacing the editor, and what are your thoughts around AI versus like the human processing that emotion or the human telling that story?
It's very hard for me to imagine an AI being able to understand emotion the way a human does. And I'll give you an example. So I was talking about season 2, episode 5 of Euphoria. It opens on this intervention scene. And they're, basically Rue and her mom get into this crazy running around the house fight because the mom has thrown away her drugs. And this whole intervention is happening. And this had a massive amount of footage. I think at least 10 takes of the whole entire thing. So my job is which of these 10 takes, and they're doing different angles and they're doing different camera moves and there's different performance and different emotion and sometimes different improv lines. And so which of those 10 takes in every single moment, every single line are you going to pick? It happens to be that my parents struggled with drug addiction when I was growing up. And I have been in that situation. There's one moment in particular where Rue is like banging on the door and her family is behind the door and she's trying to get in. And there was one night where my mom came to our house and she was banging on the door and my dad was gone. And he said, if she shows up, you have to call the police. And so here I am, in high school, and my mom is like banging on the door, and I have to call the police on my mom. So there's just like so many complicated emotions about my childhood experience and dealing with drugs. And so when I am watching the footage of this intervention scene, and I'm watching through take after take, there's moments where, it hurts me and I can feel it in my heart. It hurts my heart. And I'm like, she got it. She was able to translate, and this comes from Sam, the writer director, also experienced drug addiction growing up. So he's poured all of his experiences into the writing, into the directing, and working with Zendaya. And Zendaya has created this character who is in this, and she's created all of this emotion. And now I'm looking at this and I'm like, that's the one. That one hurts. And so it's like, I know that's real. I know there's an honesty there, a truth there. And then when that episode came out, we got hundreds and hundreds of messages from people being like, that intervention scene was one of the most realistic portrayals of addiction I've ever seen on TV. It blew them away because it felt real. It didn't feel like actors. It didn't feel like there was cameras there. It's just they got totally swept up in that emotion because it was real and it was honest. And each of us in this process poured our experience and poured our emotion into it. So how is an AI? Give the AI that same data.
And the AI will choose the best take.
Right. So the AI, again, I kind of think of the AI as like a really, really smart parrot. So the AI is looking at patterns and it's amazing at patterns, right? That's the kind of thing that it excels at. But in this situation, it's going to go back and it's going to look at patterns of things that it's seen before, and it's going to use those patterns to pick what it thinks is the best thing. Has the AI had my childhood? Has the AI had a mom? Has the AI struggled with drug addiction or known somebody who struggled with drug addiction? Does the AI even know what an emotion is? An AI can't feel. It can, in a way, intellectually know what an emotion.
What feeling, yeah.
You can tell it what an emotion is and it can identify, but it hasn't lived. It hasn't loved, it hasn't lost, it hasn't gone through all of these experiences. So how would it be able to tell what's going to resonate the most with an audience, right?
Yeah.
So I think it can be really powerful. I also think it's very hard for me to ever imagine it replacing us.
Yeah. So what are some of the concepts, possibilities of AI that you're most excited about in your filmmaking and your storytelling?
So the thing that I think I'm most excited about is really kind of taking care of a lot of the sort of manual labor of filmmaking. And I think a lot of this can come down to, I think for at least in scripted TV, a lot of the work that I would give to my assistant editor, I think could be automated and things could be done so much faster and so much quicker and sometimes instantaneously, potentially. So I'm excited about that possibility because I see this kind of trend and shift in the sort of assistant-editor relationship where these days assistant editors are they're not just, with the editor. I think, looking back kind of through the history of cinema, if you looked at some of the most, revered and amazing films, if you looked back at the relationship between the editor and the assistant editor was an apprentice. And they spent most of their time with the editor. And, so you'd have this really experienced editor passing down all of this information about how to tell story and what emotion is and the craft. And there was really this kind of great process and this kind of distillation of creativity and understanding and education that would get passed down. But nowadays, assistant editors are tasked with doing 10 million different things. They're doing visual effects, they're doing sound, they're doing turnovers, they're doing a ton of this kind of manual labor. And sometimes it is just, hey, we need a cutaway here, and we're looking for a little smile. So can you go run through all the footage and pull every shot with a little smile? And that's something I think that AI could be like, boop, give me an assembly of every close-up with a little smile, right? And instead it could take the assistant editor hours. And that could be time instead where they're in my bay and we're talking about story and we're going back and forth and we're talking about, hey, what does this scene need? What is the emotion here? And how are we going to craft this emotion? So that's something that I'm excited about AI is really being able to take away a lot of that manual labor or really increase it so that we can focus on what's important, which is the story and which is the emotion.
I feel like the conversation around AI has been so much around the risk to assistant editors. Instead, what is the opportunity that AI opens for assistant editors and sort of how, as you were saying, they can return to the genesis of the role?
Part of it, I think, is you're right that there is danger around it and that we do need protections so that I don't want to lose my assistant editor to AI. But if my assistant editor can use AI to dramatically speed up their job so that we can spending more time, and on Euphoria, we love having our assistant editors cut scenes and edit scenes. Every single assistant editor has at least an additional editor credit, every season. And we're really proud of that. But so if we had a lot of these AI abilities to be able to put things together to create sequences faster, to automate, and even maybe to do, basic visual effects and things where you could change something, a visual, and in Euphoria, we do mostly practical. There's not a lot of visual effects. Most of the visual effects are just fixes. It's like, oh, there's a light over here. There's a person over here. There's a reflection over here. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of the visual effects we do. And not that we want to put visual effects out of people out of work too, but we would rather have the visual effects people focus on the creative stuff. When we're doing some really interesting sequence where it's actually the visual effects is a huge part of the emotion, a huge part of the story, that's where we want the visual effects people to be spending their time, not on these little fixes that could potentially be done automatically. And that should the assistant editor even be having to deal with all of these things too. I think it's really important that there are protections to protect these jobs. So that we can get back to the storytelling. We can get back to the creativity, which is the most important part, and let some of the manual labor, if we can, be taken care of by the AI.
Yeah, you mentioned mentorship earlier. How much of your sort of skill and strength in storytelling came from mentorship relationships that you've had through your career?
So much. I thought I was going to be a lawyer. And so meeting this director, Bill Jersey, and having him, take me under his wing, and he really became my film school. That mentorship, I had applied to 20 different production companies before him, and no one even replied to me because I wasn't a film student, right? And he was the last place that I was calling. And so if he hadn't taken a chance on me and at least given me the opportunity to show him one of my short films, I'd be in law school. I would have, I never would have gone down this path. That mentorship with him was so crucial for him to pass down 40 years of filmmaking and storytelling and to teach me everything. And I believe so strongly in that now. I mean, I spend usually about 1 hour a week doing mentorship things. And so my husband, Mark Hartzell, and I, we do the Queer Mentorship Program through the union, and we work a lot through ACE in all sorts of different ways, doing these mentorships with the ACE interns. And it's like, we just feel like it's so, so important, especially in the current climate. This is a very difficult time in our industry right now, and I feel like we have to come together even more. And we need to pass on, what we've learned, whether it's how to get a job. And because a lot of it is, hey, you need to be networking. And especially in this, sort of post-COVID period, you need to be meeting people in person. You have to kind of get back to that a little bit. And being active in the community is so important. And so trying to mentor people to how to do that, because it's not just about storytelling and it's not just technical, but this is a people-run industry. And so being able to pass down this information, I just think is so hugely important. And I've learned from every single director I've worked with, every single producer, and all the editors that I've worked with too. I've learned so much from so many editors. Julio Perez, he's the supervising editor on Euphoria, and I just think he is brilliant, and I have learned so much from him. And so, yeah, I just think mentorship is so, so crucial.
So how important do you think it is for young people who are coming up, aspiring editors, to learn and know and understand what AI technology is coming, how the industry is evolving, and really sort of stay on top of it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's still sort of in the early days, but I think it's a good idea to keep an eye on, And I think, looking at what different companies are doing, it's like, what is Adobe doing with AI? And you guys are doing a lot of interesting things. And I think it's important to keep up with the technologies and to understand where it's going and where it might go in the future. So, at this point, I don't think it's something that somebody up and coming needs to be heavily, educated on, because it's still early, but I would definitely keep track of it. I think it's good.
Do you remember the time when, like, if you were an editor who also knew After Effects, that it was that's going to put you at the top of the resume pile?
Oh, absolutely.
I feel like that is going to start being like, the more an assistant can come in, or even a post PA can come in and be like, I really know a lot about some of the new evolving technology, is going to be a resume asterisk of this is somebody that we could really benefit our production.
Yeah, I could totally see that, because, like we were talking about before, these AI tools can dramatically speed up a lot of the manual labor. And so, yeah, if you're really good at these tools and you know how to use them and you know what they are, and they're saving you a huge amount of time, again, that's time that can be spent on more creative things and, and working on story instead of the manual labor. And that seems all good.
That's the main motivator as we think through our strategies, is sort of how can we innovate, and specifically innovate with AI, to get creatives back to being creative and not in these things that are mundane and tedious and not things that they want to be doing.
100%.
Explain to me creative flow. What does creative flow feel like to you?
So creative flow for me is where I disappear into the material. It's where it's just the material becomes my entire world. And I spend a lot of time trying to work on flow. Like when I'm working, I like to turn off my notifications and turn off my phone. And because so much of what we do is about emotion and feeling, we're the first audience. And so we need to be really in touch with our own emotions. And that's because when we're watching through material, like when we're watching through dailies, I want to really sink in and I want to feel every little tiny emotion that the actor is putting up. Emotions are like snowflakes. If you think about a single instance of an emotion, that emotion is based off of, that person's everything that has happened in that person's life up to that point, and it's based on that exact current context. And so every emotion you feel, and it's the same for an actor, doing a character, that actor, every time they're creating an emotion inside themselves, that is a unique emotion in that moment. And so what we're doing is we're watching. And so that's why I think getting into the flow is just about, it's like everything else in the whole world fades away. And it's just you and the performance, and you're feeling all the texture. You're feeling everything that the history that they've created for this character, and how they're feeding off of the other actors and that particular environment and that particular moment in time in the story. And it's magical. I mean, picking up on all those little tiny emotions, and then for you to step back and say, okay, now I understand what this actor has given us. Now look back at the bigger picture. What do I need in this moment for this scene? And what do I need this scene to accomplish in this sequence? And what do I need this sequence to accomplish emotionally in this arc and this episode and this series, this season? And so it's just this incredible process of everything else just disappears, and to me it's just all emotion, and I'm totally in love with that process. Nothing fascinates me more.
And what takes you out of your creative flow?
Some of those the more mundane things, will pull me out of that flow. So let's say, we're going along, and a lot of this stuff time, things will happen in the moment where I'll give an example. So I'm working on Euphoria, season 2, episode 5. This is like the Rue Runs episode, and the beginning of it is this intervention scene. So Zendaya is with us, and we're watching it through, and she's incredible. She's so smart and so talented. There was this one moment, and she had shot this scene months ago, and she said, "Hey, I did this one line of improv this one time, and can we try that?" And it was like, "Oh, absolutely." But finding that was not exactly easy. It took a little time, and they're all sitting in the bay waiting for me. And, I was able to find it, in a decent amount of time. But I could imagine an AI situation being like, "Hey, I think this is one of the, what if it was a conversational AI where I could say, hey, this was one of the later takes, she remembered it was one of the later takes in the day. She said something like this because she, maybe she had the exact line, maybe not. And if it could pull up that take instantly for me, then we're still in the flow, right? We're coming up with ideas. We're creative. You come up with an idea, you want to be able to jump right to something. Come up with an idea, you want to be able to put it together right away. And if you have to waste time looking for things, finding things, and sometimes this happens, I would assign this to, one of my assistant editors to be like, hey, I'm looking for this thing. I know I've seen it before and I can't find it. Can you help me find it? And they, but it might take them, you never know. And when there's huge amounts of footage. So I can imagine that would be an amazing way to stay in the moment. If I stay in the moment and like, hey, there's this one moment where this happened, or, oh, hey, there's this close up, I remember, or wait, there's the one time where the camera was up at a high angle and they only did it once. Can you find that and pull that in for me? That would be amazing, because then I can keep going, because I'm in the moment building something, building an arc, and it's like, what if I did this? Oh, what if I did this? What if I did this? What if I did this? You want to stay in that moment. And so that's how I could imagine it being helpful. Yeah.
How do you think that AI can alleviate some of the pressure that's facing the film and television industry right now?
I kind of talked a little bit about this before, where I feel like, especially when it comes to assistant editors who are completely overwhelmed with the kind of technical aspects and having to be part of visual effects and music and, a million kind of turnovers. And it seems like assistant editors are now doing 100 jobs. And that, I feel like, is this big pressure where they're always having to stay late. They're always having to work weekends. They feel completely overworked. And to me, it's like, if we could put the protections in to make sure that they're not getting replaced by AI, but if they could be using these AI tools to take all of that pressure off. And, the dream is like, yeah, do they have to be working all these endless hours? Do they have to be working every single weekend? Can we pull some of that pressure off of them? And like I said before, can we return to kind of an earlier apprenticeship mode of assistant editing where we get back to the story, where we get back to the creativity, we get back to focusing on the emotion and how we're going to make the audience feel and how we're going to make the audience think. I don't know. I'm hopeful. I do think there are things to be worried about because, thinking about ethical concerns about this, when AI is trained on other people's work and is then creating new works off of other people's work, I think that's really problematic, especially because if they're not being credited and they're not getting paid, that doesn't feel right. I also worry about representation. I worry if AIs are being trained on biased material, looking at, then the AI will be biased. Is an AI going to be trained on material that is diverse and that is inclusive? And if it's not, we're in big trouble, so I think there are things to be worried about, but there's a lot to be excited about too. And I think it's got a lot of potential. I think we've gone through these historical, technological shifts again and again and again through history. And it's the same kind of way. There's going to be positives and negatives, and we have to try to protect against the negatives. And I think we have to be very active in doing that and protect artists and protect people and protect jobs. But at the same time, if this can make our lives easier and if this can make it so that we're spending more time making stories and creating powerful works that change people and make people feel, then that's great.
Yeah, we don't take the responsibility lightly. Yeah. I think that the responsibility and the transparency, but also you bring up the biases and sort of how not only how the models are trained, but how the models are developed, how they're tested,
absolutely,
how the tech is serving up options, right? Give me some diverse options too. Don't just give me this one biased way.
Or the same pattern that we've seen 100 times.
Exactly. Right? We've been working really hard to have processes internally to make sure that we're addressing this innovation. But these kinds of conversations are part of that, is understanding just because we can doesn't mean we should.
Right.
And understanding what the creatives want from AI, where should we really be focusing is the core of what's motivating what we're doing. So I'd love to hear from you, how do you think that AI can help up-level the craft, help sort of improve our capabilities with storytelling?
Right. And again, we kind of talked about this before, it's for me, I think it is that flow, if the AI can help keep me in the flow. And I know it's interesting because with documentaries, the organization is so crucial, right? Because there's such a huge amount of material. And so you spend a huge amount of time in organization, and everything has to be labeled and everything has to be organized. And it's a huge part of the editing. And the whole purpose of all of that work is so that you can stay in the flow. You're editing an interview and then it's like, oh, your brain goes, what if we put in that one line from that one person from that one interview? Or, oh, wait, we shot this one image on that one night and that one place. And I think spending all that time building all that organization is so you can find it, find the right folder, find the right person, find the right thing, jump to the right transcript, but it's still a lot of work.
It's not replacing the actual viewing and digesting of the material, but the recall of it later on.
Yes. And so I could easily imagine the AI doing all of that organization, or you wouldn't even have to do any of that organization potentially. So, hey, there's that one shot, it's nighttime by the lake, and they're walking hand in hand. Boom, grabbed it from 500 hours of footage. There was that one shot, that one night, that one, or maybe there's 3 options. Oh, and it pulls all 3 options, puts them in a sequence. Great, I can keep going now. Let me try that image. Oh no, that image didn't quite work. But wait, what if it was that other night shoot and they were sitting on the grass? And then boom, bring that in. Oh, that works so much better. Or give an example with music, and this is an Adobe example, you throw in a song. Hey, can we just test this song out? And a lot of times, you might want to test 20 different songs. be able to use the remix feature where I throw in a song and just boop, put it down, and the AI can go in and basically put the perfect edit to this length of the song. And that to me is that's a great use of AI, because I can experiment and, scene just got longer. Oh, let's drag it out. Let's see how this feels. Throw in a different song. That saves a huge amount of time trying to match waveforms and get everything in, like, doing the little dissolves between every little edit. And again, if you can stay in the flow, if the AI can help us find what we want, put it where we want, do the kind of, perfect matching of audio, or, just clean up that one little thing in the shot, or a lot of times we'll do split screen. It's like, there's this one take where this actor, the reaction is perfect. And there's this other take where the line is perfect, but they are two different takes. And so, and so we do this all the time. We'll do a split screen.
Stitch, yeah.
Yeah, a stitch. So what if I could just have the AI put it together and tell the AI, stitch, boop, ready, done. Like, and maybe not even have to go to visual effects. And again, have visual effects focus on the creative stuff. That's just sort of manual labor too for them, right? That's where I get excited about. Again, that keeps you in the flow. It's the recall, it's the find this, it's the do this, it's the fix, it's all the manual stuff, all the technical stuff. If it can do it for me, great. And then I can just stay in that flow and stay in that emotion.
So what excites you about the future of filmmaking?
So I think our industry is going through huge changes right now. But I'm always excited about the future of storytelling, because stories are such a big part of what makes us human. And sharing experiences with each other and learning and growing from stories and being able to experience different points of view. This is always going to be hugely important to humanity. And I think these technological changes, they always come, they always happen. And I don't think we should be afraid of them. I do think we should be proactive with them. I think it's good to be talking about them and having conversations about them. I think we have to be very active. I think we need to be very deliberate about the decisions we make around them, to protect ourselves, and to protect the industry, to protect people, to protect jobs, to protect artists. But at the same time, these technologies could potentially make our lives better as storytellers. And these are innovations that, like we said before, could help us stay in the flow, which I think would make us better artists and allow us to create even more emotional and powerful things by knowing the strengths and weaknesses of these technologies and these innovations, and knowing when to use them and when not. I'm excited. I think it's exciting to be in this time period, and I'm excited to be a part. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of this conversation.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I'm really glad we were able to have your voice as part of the conversation. So thank you.
My pleasure.
And it's important for us to continue making space for these conversations. The discourse includes you. We want to hear from you. What are your questions? Let us know what you're thinking, and stay tuned for more.